We on mute? Probably.
Rotary Club of Fort Worth. It is great to see everybody. All right, we will welcome to the stage Brandon Gingelbach, President and CEO, Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, to give our invocation, followed by the national anthem played by Wesley Gentle, Director of Advancement, the Arts Council of Fort Worth.
Thank you. All right, everybody, let's give thanks to God for Happy Friday. Bow your heads, please. Almighty God, you are the source of all blessings, and so we have you to thank for all the blessings we see in this moment. In a world where many are hungry, you have provided us food to eat. In a world where many are lonely, you have surrounded us with friends. In a world where so many lack purpose, you have provided us with a reason to gather. For the blessings of this moment, we give you thanks. Recognizing our blessings, may we be nourished by them, and may we in return be a blessing to our families, our community, and our world. Amen.
Play ball, you may be seated. And now we welcome to the stage Derek Moffitt, Principal, Moffitt Financial Strategies, to welcome our guests today. Derek.
Thank you, Courtney, President Courtney. Looks like we're having a party.
There's a party going on.
All right, let's take a moment here to welcome the guests of our Rotary Club. And if you feel so inclined, you may stand up, shout, hoot and holler, and clap for everybody, or we could wait and just do it once at the end. It's your choice. First of all, I'd like to welcome Michael Gross, who is a guest of President Courtney. Eric Starnes, who is a guest of Mac Kimball. Leah Hershey, who is a guest, I guess a Rotaract member. Rod Nelson is a guest of Mark Maurer. Angela Castillo is a guest of past President J.R. Labby. Mr. Garrett Meyer is a guest of Bob Mitchell. And finally, Amy Byram is a guest of our speaker, David Grantham. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek, and welcome to all of our guests. And now it is test time. Here at Rotary, we have a four-way test to help guide us in the things we think, say, and do. So if you will repeat with me, number 1, is it the truth? 2, is it fair to all concerned? 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you, you all passed. And now we will put that little test aside for just 3 minutes for today's newscast. Michelle Krim, President, Dynamic Development Strategies. Come on up.
I feel as welcome as Chris Rock at Will Smith's table at the Oscars. And y'all, I don't care how bad this newscast is, nobody come on stage and slap me. Alrighty, guys, let's get started. All right, today is Friday, April the 1st, April Fools, no joke. Few other fun holidays, it's Edible Book Day. It is Walk to Work Day, National 1 Cent Day, and of course, National Fun at Work Day. As another reminder, and you know who you are, it's National Do Not Reply All to your emails. Okay, guys, I've got some shocking news, and it concerns me. 600 Crims are being deported. Yeah, I have to tell you that I've been caught up in this tangled mess. I don't know why, maybe it's too many Snoopy posts, too many bad newscasts, but they're shipping me to New Jersey. Wait a minute, just in, apparently that was all fake news. All right, last week, President Biden called Vladimir Putin a butcher. Some felt this was a rather unseasoned remark and lacked political flavor. Plus, Biden was really going for the vegan vote. Our own President Courtney, in her 3 things, I saw her turn, her 3 things message this week referenced her BHAG membership goal for the year. Now, she called it a big, hair, audacious goal, and I thought she would have meant big, hairy, audacious goal, but then I thought, as a native Texan, I really appreciate big hair, big earrings, and big attitudes. Right, ladies? All righty. Where's the beef? PepsiCo and Beyond Meat have a joint venture and are launching a plant-based jerky this month. The 2 companies will face some tough competition in the vegan jerky market. Now, early focus groups have been done here in Texas and showing mixed results. One side indicated that the jerky was flavorful and had hints of environmentally friendly texture. The other group was not impressed and felt the jerky was a crime against humanity and a fraud to the legitimate beef jerky market. Texans are rallying to this cause, saying, don't be a jerk. Recently, Mars Inc. announced they're going to have a, quote, global commitment to creating a world where everyone feels they belong and society is inclusive, end quote. To prove this commitment, the candy company plans on refreshing the looks and the personality of their M&M mascots. So Orange, traditionally kind of anxious, will now embrace his, quote, true self, and will be described as dealing with social anxiety. Well, of course he's anxious. He's about to be eaten. He's delicious. Now, I wonder about Green. Do you ever think she's got like a secret personality, maybe a side job, side hustle, maybe a bit of a gremlin, maybe a movie cameo? Who knows? All righty, food, meaty skincare. Oscar Mayer is introducing a cold slice on self-care. This is for real. It's true, Oscar Mayer is selling bologna-inspired face masks. Now, I think I have a beef with this one. Yes, thank you, Andy. Now, this sheet mask is not real bologna. Yeah, some of you got that. You put it on your face, not your sandwich. All righty. It's not wanting to work. But you know what? We're going to keep going. Okay. All right, it was a bang-up time at the Oscars. Last Sunday, the 94th annual Oscars with a side of boxing. Yes, Best Actor Will Smith decked Chris Rock on the stage because Rock made a joke about Will's wife. Everybody was rocked by Will's gesture, including the 105 people watching the Oscars live that night. Chris Rock did not press charges, which is good because that means Will Smith will not be the fresh prince of Hollywood. And finally, we've all heard the news that Riata Restaurant and Sundance Square are parting ways. Sundance wouldn't wine and dine Riata, and Riata said take the space and park it. Some worry that Fort Worth's downtown area is fading, but others say, you know, this is happening everywhere. You know, and it's okay that Sundance will recycle itself. Unfortunately, this isn't recycling, y'all. This is throwing everything into the landfill. Take care. Cheers.
Thank you, Michelle. And now for a golf update. Onyinye Akujo, Director, JPS Foundation. Come on up.
Thank you, President Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to do your Crazy Pants golf tournament update and whiskey tasting. This is taking place on May 16, 2022 at the Ridgely Country Club. I am honored to serve on this wonderful golf committee alongside with Blair Hancock, David Campbell, Ty Stimson, just to name a few. And we're honored to say that we did pretty well so far with our sponsorships, but we have 3 spots left. So if you want to be a title sponsor, which includes 8 golfers, beverage cart sponsor, because we got to have some drinks, 4 golfers included, and of course, dinner sponsor, because of course, golfers have to eat, please reach out to any one of us on the committee and we'll be able to support your requests. We just have 3 left. But really quickly, I just want to thank a couple of the companies that actually supported us. So for our lunch sponsor, which includes 4 golfers, is the Patterson Law Group. We also have the putting green sponsor with Bancorp South. We have the golf cart sponsor with Hewitt Zollers, our driving range with Limbeck, our award sponsor is Cadence Bank, and we have the pro shop sponsor, Prim Construction, and our host sponsors are First Financial Bank, our dear past president Larry Amphin, and of course, Yates Construction as well. Thank you all so much.
And now we have 2 blue badges to award. First up is Brandon Gingelbach. Come on up. And our other blue badge is Jared Williams, but Mr. Williams is on a flight to Italy with Sister City, so he couldn't be here. So if you're on Zoom, Jared, I have your badge. Tough life. And now our chairman of the day, Kurt Driver, Captain, City of Fort Worth Police Department, will come introduce our program for the day. Kurt.
Thank you, Courtney. So before I get started, I gotta say, I really enjoy Rotary, and I got new swag. So, yeah. Rotary. Go Rotary. Yeah. So I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker to you, Dr. David Grantham. Dr. Grantham has a PhD in modern history. He is the president, CEO of Grantham Strategies, which is a security consulting firm that does international and regional issues for businesses. He's also an author, and he'll talk more about that. At the same time, now this guy's got a lot of different jobs. He's the Chief Deputy of Intelligence and Technology for Tarrant County Sheriff's Office. He's been there 5 years. He came there after a tour in the United States Air Force, where he was in the Office of Special Investigations. He is a senior fellow with the Center for a Secure and Free Society, which is a DC think tank. He lives in the mid-cities, married, 3 kids. His wife is a nurse, so bless you for that. And on the side, he also takes Taekwondo with his children. He has a first-degree black belt, training for his second. So give it up for David, Dr. Grantham.
You know, I don't know if you recall, this was several years ago when the Pope came to visit the United States. There was a big to-do about that. I believe he was up in the Philadelphia area for a time. And what most people don't know is while the Pope was here, he went outside the city. He had convinced his driver that he wanted to take a little tour of the rural areas of the United States. So he went out there. At some point in this drive, the Pope told his driver, he said, "Let me drive." And then his driver said, "Oh, sir, I can't do that." He goes, "Come on, no one's out here. No one's gonna know. Let me switch, let me drive for a little bit." So they switched. Well, what his driver didn't know at the time is the Pope tends to have a lead foot. So he was booking it down these backcountry roads, and a local sheriff's office pulls him over, local deputy. Deputy goes to the window, knocks on the window, Pope rolls down the window. He said, "Sir, you were speeding." He goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." He goes, "Are you gonna write me a ticket?" He goes, "Hold on one second." Deputy goes back, calls dispatch. He said, "Hey, I've pulled over a black limo speeding out here on I-49. He goes, "Okay, write him a ticket. What's the problem?" He goes, "Well, whoever it is, the Pope is his chauffeur." You know, intelligence can be a lot like that. What we find in the intelligence world is that we're often not faced with the so what, but the now what. We provide information, we analyze, we have our sources, we advise policymakers on our findings, and then we get looked at with the, okay, now what? Now what do I do with your information? And so today, I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience in the war on terror as an intelligence officer in the Air Force, and then talk to you about how we're using what we learned today to improve public safety. I have the privilege of having worked in both worlds and continue to apply what we've learned. And part of me felt inspired to give these talks because of how bad Afghanistan ended. And I didn't want that to be the last image that we had in our mind. I wanted us to know, despite failures, despite frustrations, we did learn a lot, especially in the intelligence community, and we're using that knowledge today. Before I jump into that, I always want to recognize my fellow veterans. Are there any veterans in the room? Thank you for your service. I won't rehash the bio. Sometimes they announce that bio and I go, gosh, I'm so excited. I can't wait what I get to hear, what I get to say here. But like I said, there's 3 things. So what I want to talk about is what we learned in the war on terror, how we're applying it today, and then some takeaways, the now whats. What can you take away to your community, to your business, to your children, to your grandchildren? and help them know what to look out for today. And then a little bit of hope at the end. I like to end with hope. But first, who I am. How did I get here? I'm originally from Tampa, Florida. My mother is from the and my father is from Florida. So I grew up in a kind of a mixed home, bilingual home with different cultures. Now, she was a missionary child in the Dominican Republic, but one of the parents were Cuban. So we grew up with a Cuban dialect, with Dominican food, with my dad, who my kids call abuelo, which is grandfather. He says, I'm the whitest abuelo in America. So I had this very unique upbringing. You can imagine how that was spread across my life and my identity. I also loved sports. I particularly loved basketball. And I grew up in an area where my church was in the inner city, my school was in the inner city. So naturally, I was a minority when I was out playing on the streets. But I loved it. I grew up with a different kind of music. I enjoyed R&B, rap. That was what I enjoyed. I also loved to fish. So you can only imagine this boy on a boat fishing with his country friends, listening to his rap, unpacking his Cuban sandwich. I didn't fit anyone's identity. I really didn't fit into a group. It got a little bit worse when I got to college, because I grew up in church. My dad's a minister, still is. And I attended Rotary growing up with my uncle back in Tarpon Springs. So I have a fondness for Rotary. And I enjoyed college, University of South Florida, which is a very secular college. And it was a challenge for me to adapt to this new environment. So on top of my identity, it was complicated by where I went, but I enjoyed it. So I ended up joining the ROTC program at South Florida, University of South Florida. I wanted to be a spy as long as I could remember. That was my dream. I didn't know what that looked like, but that's what I wanted to be. And when I joined the Air Force ROTC unit, they said, there's one thing in the Air Force that does anything remotely to what you're talking about, and that's Office of Special Investigation. I said, I want to do that. They said, good luck. They take maybe 5 people nationwide every year. I said, okay, well, I see that as a challenge. So I worked hard through school, was able to join and was selected for the Air Force Office of Special Investigation. And I like to brag, not that there's any fighter pilots out there, but sometimes they say fighter pilots is the hardest job to get into in the Air Force. And I said, no, it's not. It's OSI. By percentage, they take the smallest amount of people nationwide. So I was honored to have been selected for that. And when I joined, I thought, let me see how this goes. I want to be in intelligence. I want to work in this environment. I mean, I had dreams of being in undercover clothing in some open market in Pakistan. That was what I dreamt of. Of course, my mom was just frightened sick of all my wild ideas. But when I joined the intelligence community, what I learned was, for the first time, my complicated identity, the fact that I felt like I couldn't fit in with anybody, helped. As an intelligence officer, I had to learn to collect information, to befriend people, to build rapport with people that were nothing like me, something like me, exactly like me. I had to be able to move in and out of all kinds of environments, circles, countries. And for the one time in my life, I felt like I belong here. And so from there, when I joined the Office of Special Investigation, we deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is where I'll talk a little bit about what we learned. But first, the specialty within OSI is counterintelligence. What is counterintelligence? Intelligence, many businessmen and women in the room, I'm sure, you can think of intelligence as the major company, and then you have all these subsidiaries, all these specialties, if you will. My wife and I relate well because in the hospital, there are just a litany of specialties. It's like that with intelligence. Counterintelligence is essentially, we are the ones who watch the spies. We are the spies watching the spies. We are trained to guard our secrets. We are trained to spot people who would want to steal things from us. We are trained to spot those, unfortunately, among us who have been compromised by other countries. So when a lot of our work was designed to spot people who exhibit behavior, Americans who exhibit behavior that is indicative of working for a foreign country. So as we're learning this counterintelligence role, we're being trained by Cold War experts. These guys are good. But one thing they lacked was speed, because their environment historically was slow and methodical. The best intelligence collected is slow and methodical. When we got to Iraq and Afghanistan, we realized counterintelligence and intelligence in general, it's got to be quick. Roadside bombs, if you remember, were killing people, soldiers, airmen, at a frightening pace. In fact, and not to lighten the topic, but I recall when, after a few years of marriage, I was going to be out of town for Mother's Day, and I took a gift, and I wrapped it, and I found my, you have old unused cell phones, so I programmed the alarm for 3 days later, make sure it was charged, strapped it to the gift, and slid it under the bed, and then I left. My wife texts me 3 days later. She goes, it scared me to death, but how creative. Where did you learn such an interesting way of giving a gift? I went, Al-Qaeda. So what we learned, the first thing, speed. Intelligence had to speed up. Since people were getting killed so quickly, we had to learn where are the bombs, who's planting them, how can we stop them? But in order to do that, we had to develop sources. We had to find people who knew this information, or we had to have some technology that would help us identify spots that are most likely to be used on convoys. So the intelligence had to be quick, and that is incredibly difficult. You're supplying information to policymakers, to commanders who are making big decisions. They are rerouting major convoys based on your intelligence. And we had to do that quickly. So that was one thing we learned. How do we speed up the intelligence? And what we began doing was we had a process where we'd identify sources, vet them, get the information they had, and move quickly. And we developed a really good process for doing that. That was one thing that I think, if there was a feather in our cap that came out of the war on terror, was taking the traditional intelligence model of collecting, analyzing, disseminating, and acting, and we condensed it. And we were good at it. A second thing we learned was the value of nuance. Now, there's a video that I often show, but half the time it doesn't work. So in this video, that we were up in the mountains of Afghanistan, and we were collecting munitions from local tribes. And what we would do is we would buy back the munitions from them so they couldn't use them as roadside bombs. We'd give them food, whatever, and they would give us munitions, we would blow them up. The video is us filming one of those operations where we blow up the C4 up in the mountains. 2 weeks later, someone comes to the gate and says, hey, I just want to let you know, some people are out near my village, and I just wanted to tell you, don't go back out there because the Taliban has been negotiating with that village about handing over whoever keeps visiting. We start walking down that path with them. Turns out it was us. We only learned later that this village said, you know what, no, we'd rather have their food than kill them. So we were like chickens being bartered over. Do you want the egg or do you want the meat? We had no idea. But there was a dynamic there. Why would a village communicate with the Taliban like that? Why would the Taliban acquiesce to their wishes that we don't want to do that? There was a lot of nuance in here, and what we began to unpack, and this is just one example of a million, is this village had family in the Taliban. The Taliban was not hostile to this village. They felt like they had a mission. This village was not hostile to them. They knew they had a mission, they just don't want to be part of it. And they agreed to disagree. And that was the dynamic in this little village. There was multiple layers of this in other villages where the Taliban was not appreciated, where they were hated, where they were loved. What we began to learn very quickly is that nuance mattered not just for academic sense. It mattered for life and death. We had to know why this village thought the way they did, why this chief felt the way he did, because it mattered if we went through there with a convoy. It mattered if we were out there collecting intelligence. So nuance became more than just a icing on the cake for real information. It became the real information. The last thing, and I call it the unsexy things. We learned all the things that aren't bombs, guns, bad guys was actually the most critical. Money, communication, those things, logistics, those things are what really mattered. And speaking of communication, it mattered on the base too. In fact, I recall one day coming back from a source meet, and I was very stressed. It was very heavy stuff. And I sat down on my email, and an email came through. And the email essentially said, because people were using aerosol cans, hairspray, in their small hooch, we called them. Well, they were explosive, left out in the heat. And the commander of the base decided we need to get rid of aerosol cans, but instead he spelled it arousal. You can only imagine the uproar and laughter that came with that, where I was getting emails for days asking me, the intelligence guy, do you know where I can get an arousal can? So communication matters. And there we go. All right. Faster intelligence, local dynamics, funding activity, so the non-sexy stuff. So, but we learned the communication matters. How they communicate will tell you a lot more prior to an attack. How they are funded. If you can cut off the funding, it becomes very difficult to do anything. Funding over there is direct. So if you cut off a direct funding, it's not like they have a multitude of options. They don't have stocks, an emergency fund, maybe a side gig. It's usually one person providing money. If you can cut that off, you've cut it off. But you have to be interested in those local things. So, speaking of that, what we are learning locally, how we're applying what we've learned here. Before I get to that, I always like to quote the great philosopher Paul Harvey. In times like these, it's always good to remember that there's always been times like these. So as I transition into the modern day and we talk about what's going on right now, keep this in mind. It feels new and some of it is new, but the principles largely remain the same. And we can take hope in that because we have solutions from the past that we can leverage. So what we're learning, we have gone into applying this intelligence on a local level in terms of anticipating threats and producing intelligence quicker. One example that has touched all our lives is school shootings, mass shootings. That's been absolutely critical in terms of collecting intelligence quickly, disseminating it quickly, and acting quickly. And had we not actually gone through and experienced this war on terror, this method would be very difficult to execute. But because we have some experience with this and we know the stress that comes with getting it right and getting it wrong, it's not a feeling that's unfamiliar. So when someone says we think someone is about to go shoot this school, we don't panic because, at least for us veterans, we go, for intel, we said, we've been here before. Keep calm. Here's how we're going to do this. Here's how we're going to sparse out the information. So you can, I see Kirk nodding his head because we work with Fort Worth hand in glove on a lot of these things. And I always am encouraged when I'm meeting other veterans and other law enforcement officers and we start talking about this process and everyone is executing on this process to get better at accurate information quickly so policymakers can make decisions, so we can act, and so we can keep our communities safe. The second thing is nuance. We brought back that nuance and said, you've got to appreciate the small things. You got to appreciate the things that maybe don't appear as that interesting. One of the operations that we do at the sheriff's office, as you probably know, we have exclusive jurisdiction over the jail. That's the sheriff's main job. And as a human intelligence officer, that means I interact with people, when he brought me on, he said, now what? I said, you got 4,000 people over there, let me loose. And he did. And I began talking to people, getting to know them, hearing what they had to say, and gathering information. And one thing that I learned was nuance matters, just like it did in Afghanistan. I talked to one individual who's tied into the Mexican cartels, and he told me, he said, this group is classy. They know what they're doing. They have drugs that are on time. They pay what they said they're going to pay. This group is dirty. They're lazy. He goes, this group will always be where you want them to be. And so I took that to our drug unit and I said, hey, if you know which cartel it is, you can expect this one to be on time, but they're also going to know what they're doing, so be careful. Those were little nuances that help perfect our operations. He told me during that same conversation, he said, the other thing is this group, they like to brag about where they're from in Mexico. And they like to have stores and restaurants and bars. They'll put the name of the city they're from back in Mexico in the title sometimes. He said, so watch for that. And man, if it wasn't a week later, we started researching some of the businesses and I said, boom, right there, that's it. Got the name buried inside the title. Now, again, that doesn't help prosecute them, but it enhances the operation so we know where to marshal our resources, how to react, and how to know who you're about to confront. And then that tactical information, the financial information, the unsexy is absolutely critical. And one thing that I like to point out with COVID, when COVID shut down, or say when we shut down the border because of COVID, the price of methamphetamine dropped significantly. The price of heroin and cocaine did not. I started asking why. I pulled out dealers from their jail cells and I said, why is that? What is going on? And they're looking at me like, why the heck do you care about that? Well, they started talking to me about it. And it was directly related to the border. And what that told us, that was somehow heroin and cocaine still remain here despite the border being closed. How is that? And we started digging into that further, and we started learning about the shelf life of cocaine. Powdered cocaine can be stored in a dry, unlit place for years, and then pulled out, and then distributed. Methamphetamine cannot. Methamphetamine has a shelf life, at least for now. We've already got word that they're improving the shelf life. So methamphetamine has to be developed, sold fairly quickly. Cocaine, not so much. Heroin, very addictive. Your users will always want their heroin. You never have to worry. Your customer will always be there. You shut down the border, doesn't matter. If you get the heroin over, people will buy it because it's so dangerous and addictive. So speaking of dangerous and addictive, I promise we're getting to the hope. The drug war right now, though the experimentation phase has shrunk almost imperceptibly. This here, that's a lethal dose of fentanyl. That's a lethal dose of carfentanil, which is used for elephant tranquilizer, and that's a lethal dose of fentanyl. People are experimenting now with drugs and dying on their first try. Some people who have tried drugs a few times, have dabbled, are dying. So I caution people, and I tell people, go back to your friends, your community, your churches, your businesses, your schools, and stress this. There is no more, as I like to say, there's no more Jimi Hendrix marijuana. It's not fun, and then maybe it gets carried away as you get older, or you get more of a habitual user. People are dying before they can even get to that habitual user phase because the drugs are so deadly and so potent. The other thing is fraud. We always encourage people, if you experience fraud, please report it. COVID has created, as you can imagine, there's so much money, cash sloshing around in the economy. Criminals took advantage of that. And because COVID stimulus and all things have run out, they now have met a certain threshold of living that they want to stay at because of that free money. And now they're committing more and more crimes to keep their living standard where it was when they had that money coming in, fraudulent or otherwise. And now fraud can be embarrassing, I know. Sometimes you don't know if it even meets a threshold. I encourage you, report any instance because law enforcement often has to meet a threshold, but we can meet it collectively. If there's one person committing fraud against 7 or 8 victims, and each instance is a small amount, collectively that amount could meet a threshold that could open an investigation. So never think that your incident doesn't warrant contacting the police. Contact them. Fraud is rampant, and the only way we stop it is if the community is contacting law enforcement to let us know. So, the hope. All of this, we have all these drugs coming in, we have this fraud, we have threats from all over the world, you have war in Europe. And what I stress, and that's why I love coming to talk to Rotary, is because having worked at the federal level, the local level, working at a think tank in DC, writing a book about my time in Iraq, those 3 things always come back. Local power matters. Local decisions are what moves this country, and local solutions are where it starts. Time and time again, and I can tell you from working on both sides, when a local solution works, that's what gets DC's attention. When we're looking at improving the drug situation, improving fraud, improving public safety, it starts right here. It starts at your table. And I always want to give that hope because the United States is uniquely situated for that. We have federalism. The sheriff is elected, just like the mayor, just like the governor. These officials have power and they can make local decisions. A lot of countries don't have that benefit. A lot of times when one person at the top makes the decision, the country essentially follows suit. You saw that with COVID. There were just a mass of different decision-making going on, a mass of different outcomes. So if you want to know what do we do, what's our hope, there's a bunch of solutions that I could maybe throw out there, but really it starts with knowing that your community matters, you matter, your ideas matter, and your influence matters. So with that, I will take any questions if we have time. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Kirk, for the introduction. I appreciate all that you guys do for our community and for the world. I know very well how important Rotary is, so I'm so glad to be here.
First of all, thank you for your service to our country. I think when we think of international espionage, we think of James Bond, Jason Bourne, and all the crazy stories and things they do. Can you share with us just some maybe? I know you shared the story about Al Qaeda. Any other close calls or really remarkable situations or things that you think only exist in Hollywood, but maybe you've seen or experienced in real life? That's
a great question. Yeah, there's in fact, my book is a lot of close calls, but there's everything from the small. I recall being in Iraq and I was fixing a computer or a TV tied to a computer. We're trying to watch the baseball playoffs. And it was 3 a.m, couldn't get it to work. And one of the guys says, "Hey, I think I got it on the internet over here on the computer." As I walked back, we heard this loud boom. And I was, what in the world was that? We go look outside, we don't see anything. I go back right where I was standing, and they'll do celebratory fire a lot, shoot their AKs in the air. The round had come down, gone through the double wide trailer roof, and struck right where I was standing, went right through. And I looked through the hole, and I could see the spent round on the ground. So me and my buddy talked to this day, and I'll say, well, I'm just glad you called me over. But there's a lot of, the espionage in many ways it is a lot less sexy than Jason Bourne and a lot more fun, if that makes sense. There's a lot of tense moments, a lot of unpacking. One of the moments that we had, we went into a jail, Camp Bucca, which was essentially where ISIS was formed. That's what inspired me to write my book, was having been there and then learning later that ISIS was formed there. And being able to talk to an Al-Qaeda member who began unpacking how Al-Qaeda thinks and how you're not gonna stop them. They had just kidnapped some soldiers. He said, you won't find them. They're gonna give you an ultimatum that you can't fill, and then they're gonna kill them. And that's exactly what they did. But we spent the next 3 or 4 days searching. I mean, guys in Baghdad were searching, and it was a high threat, high intensity, and then it was a complete letdown. But it still was a moment where it was the same level of intensity with Jason Bourne, probably without the outcome that we wanted. But I look back on that, and I find those kind of moments really exhilarating, if you will, but in a humble and tactful way. I wish I had better stories at the top of my head. Go ahead. Yeah.
Question is, they know that it's killed. Where's the motive to be able to kill your clients?
I was just on a podcast a few weeks ago with Secure Free Society, my think tank, and we talked about this very thing. And while I can't dissect the actual intent of the cartels and why they do this, there's 2 factors to consider. China supports a lot of this in terms of the fentanyl precursors. They send the material to Mexico, they can put it together and then ship the fentanyl. China is completely fine if we destabilize our communities. They're completely fine if they're not directly connected to the death of Americans. To them, it's a hybrid war against us. So that's one. The second is the cartels, despite what and some DEA may disagree with me, but I don't believe the cartels are merely a profit-seeking enterprise. They are at war with us. And I'll quote a cartel member that we talked to in our jail. He said, David, we will send whatever kills the gringo. He said, we have narco songs. There are narco bands. These bands travel Mexico and sing and perform for drug organizations. And they have a narco ballad that says we will we'll send whatever kills the gringo. And gringo is American, it's not skin color. And I said, well, you're killing your own people. Hispanics are taking this just as much. And he goes, they're still gringo. So when he said that, it really, in the fact that they have songs and they celebrate this idea, that told me, yes, we want to make money, but your death means nothing to us. And in fact, it achieves another goal, which is killing the gringo. So when we think about the cartels, we do have to think about them, again, going back to nuance. It's not merely profit, although that's very, very important. It's also them willingly admitting that they're at war with us and with the American ideal, with the American community. And frankly, they're at war with anyone who challenges their power. So if it's not us, it's somebody else. They don't care. But they want to be in power and they want to kill anyone who might resist that power. And you had a question.
I'm feeling good that you chose to live in DFW. I think that's a good big sign. But right now, the prospect of a potential nuclear strike, for example, or we hear about cybersecurity. I'm very interested in your thoughts about the points that are most susceptible in the country. I have my own thoughts.
Sure.
I would really like to know your assessment. Where does DFW stack up? And also the multiple layers, the federal, who's protecting us?
Mhm.
At the various levels of the state, the local, the federal.
So the big question first, the nuclear option. I think it's with someone like the playbook to me kind of went out the window when he invaded the Ukraine, because that said, there's a difference between practical application and ideological application, and many people thought he would be practical in terms of his application and say, he always wants Ukraine. That was not a surprise. He's been chipping away at the country for years. So that was no shock that he attempted this. But what was shocking was the ideological bent that he took. He said, no, I want it all back. It's part of the Russian Federation. He was quoting Lenin. He was saying Lenin made a mistake by giving away Ukraine. That's how far back he was thinking. So with that in mind, I think the nuclear option becomes more, I would say more probable because it was less probable from the beginning, but I think it becomes more probable simply because he's coming from an ideological bent, which means if I can't have it, nobody can. Now, tactically speaking, where would he launch that? Would he, it's any number of places. We do have missile defense in the United States. The one place we don't have it is along our southern flank. That's always been our concern. We are blind on our southern flank. East and west, we can see them coming. South, if you park a ship in the Gulf of Mexico and launch something, we won't see it, or at least we won't see it till it's too late. Hopefully we would see it before it got to the Gulf of Mexico, though. So I think more than likely, if he decides for tactical nukes, he will use them against Europe. I don't think he believes Europe would stand against him, and he feels in the aftermath of a nuclear strike, Russia comes out on top because Europe is not prepared militarily to defend after something that drastic. He would. So I think, and this is me just, reading the tea leaves, but I think that option became more important to me based on the fact of his ideological convictions in Ukraine. But we're already seeing now where there's breaks in his government. There are a lot of people that are not happy, rightfully so. So part of me hopes that will, it's not like he has a big red button. Everything I've read, it's not like he just has it at his desk and he just, say something wrong, it's over, There are steps and there are people that stand between him and that. So I'm praying and crossing my fingers that those people will continue to stay strong in face of that. In terms of cybersecurity, I think our greatest, so you have low probability, high impact attacks, and you have low probability, high impact, high probability, low impact. High probability, low impact is businesses disrupting school districts, local law enforcement. The low probability, high impact is the grid. And I've spoken on the grid for a long time. The grid is the number one. And remember, Texas has its own grid. There's the Western, Texas, Eastern. We have our own. And the testing, I told my wife as we were freezing during the storm a few years ago in our house, all huddled around our fire, I said, this is great because this is a wake-up call to our state. And if this is the worst thing that happens, is that we have this and we prepare accordingly, this may be divine intervention giving us a mulligan and saying, you better fix this. This is a warning. So I think we've gotten better since then. So I feel more confident in our grid for sure. But I think that's probably the biggest issue. And then whether DFW on his list of targets, the theory that I have when it comes to national security, international affairs, and it goes back to local influence matters more now because, and I say, as Texas goes, so goes the nation. I jokingly say, if God bless Texas, but he lives in Florida. But I'll readily admit that as Texas goes, so goes the nation. There is so much here that the United States relies on that if I was Russia, I would be thinking, don't even bother with the rest of the United States. If you take out Texas, the US will be so disjointed, so disrupted that they won't be able to function. So I think local threats, the importance of our local areas matter more now to foreign adversaries than they did 10, 20 years ago, for sure. So I would, yes, not to scare anyone, this is more my theories than what, but we're seeing a lot of cyber attacks hit local businesses, local police departments, local DoD contractors, Lockheed, Raytheon. They know, just hit them local. It's way too much money to try to hit people in DC. Far too expensive. And this goes to who's protecting us. There is increased cooperation between the federal government and local government. So when it comes to cyber, we've greatly improved those relationships. It's not great or where it needs to be, but it's improved a lot. So if nothing else, communication has improved so we can share. That's where I go back to fraud. If you're hacked and your things are stolen, finances are stolen from you, you need to report that, because there is a great chain of communication. If it's Bitcoin and you've paid in Bitcoin, there are steps to stop the transfer of Bitcoin and get that money back. So there's a nice communication stream now than there was even when I was in the federal government. So you can take comfort in, if nothing else, not that we would stop something better, but we certainly would be able to communicate much better than before. So, and there was another hand. Go ahead.
Sheriff Wayborn and District Attorney Sheriff Wilson have done some things better and different than Dallas and Houston. Want to give you an opportunity to close on something positive.
Yeah. Well, he hired me, so I thought do better than that. Yes. Sheriff Wayborn is aggressive and he cares. Sometimes that is his fault. Is he sometimes, I mean, it's a joke when you're in an interview and you say, what's my weakness? I care too much. Nobody wants to hear that. But for Sheriff Wayborn, I can say it does. He cares sometimes too much. He wants to be everywhere and support everybody. But part of that has inspired him to create departments within the sheriff's office that never existed, to expand operations within the jail that would decrease return customers. I mean, he's looking at a whole scope. So he's implemented a lot of great programs that are benefiting public safety and really taking the sheriff's office to a place it's never been before.
I want to keep putting on this, but I want to reference what you've been talking about before. So what is the impact to us with the soft border?
With the what?
With the soft southern border?
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. And we could talk for days on that. Our think tank that I work with, we work a lot on border issues. And one thing that, there's two things. First thing is remembering it is a true statement to say every community is a border community, because what crosses over the border rarely stays on the border. It crosses the border and heads north. We are a major distribution point for drugs, for trafficked people. And so it is a true statement now with transportation to say every community is a border community in terms of the impact. So that's why local decisions matter, because just because you don't see the border, you're not on the border, doesn't mean you're not impacted daily. The other thing is really looking past the border. Pay attention to Latin America and the movements there. Chile just elected their first socialist-leaning president. Colombia, who's been a great friend of ours for a long time, is trending toward people that are favorable to Castro family in Cuba and to Chavez in Venezuela, who are no good. In fact, one of the papers that we'll be publishing soon talks about how Venezuela is using drugs as a weapon against the United States. It's their de facto war against us. But I encourage you to look past the border and understand where everything is coming from and who's acting down there. And my latest position, if you will, with our think tank is I'm saying we have to strengthen what remains. And that's find those allies, Dominican Republic, which I'm partial to because my mother's from there, I've been there many times. I still have friends and family there. Strengthen those relationships and show them that free markets matter, are important to national security. Freedom of religion is important to national security. You know, build these bridges and advocate for these things. I think free markets is really the big one in Latin America. If we can educate our free market, private property, those are things that are kind of an anathema to people, some people down there. Advocating for those things. I know it's hard to invest down there because you never know which way the winds are blowing, but it's an important angle to take down there. So look past the border on the south and look past the border on the north, and you'll really get a better understanding of the border itself and its impact. Thank you.
It's a tradition of the Rotary Club of Fort Worth to donate a library book on behalf of your speech today.
Thank you.
And that's a copy of the book plate that'll be in the book. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you all.
Wow, now some of that was a little scary, but I'm glad that we have you here with us now. A couple closing announcements. Bake sale is still going on, and yes, I do make the cupcakes, not the Fort Worth Club. And Shanna Saldana is my partner in crime in the baking, so if you make a donation to the Rotary International Disaster Fund, we will deliver a box of cupcakes to you. We have our Tarrant Area Food Bank wine in the warehouse event coming up. There are flyers on your table. We have about 24 people signed up, room for 45, so if you're interested, go ahead and sign up. Our Rotaract Club is participating with the Habitat for Humanity Cowtown Brush Up event, and if you'd like to help them, there should be flyers on your table for that as well. Our April grant deadline comes up on April the 15th, so if you know any 501c3s that would like funding from our two endowments, please have them send in an application by April 15th. Next week's program is Rob Ramage, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Texas Motor Speedway. With that, we are adjourned. Have a great weekend.